And I want to take you back to the start of your rowing career. Just maybe how come? I mean, why rowing? Why did you and this sport find yourself together? What was it that drew you into it?
Well, I love playing rugby. Actually, when I first, because I came over to school in the UK when I was about 14, and loved playing rugby. And one of my mates at school said, "Oh, do you want to do this thing called rowing? It keeps you really fit through through the summer months, and then you can come back and be stronger for rugby." I was like, "All right, that sounds like a great idea." And so I got into it that way, and it was very early on in my rowing career. I think it was the next year. Redgrave and Pinsent won in Atlanta, and they were the only gold medal. Yeah. And I watched that race, and I watched when Steve just collapsed over the oar. And I've always been massively into sort of how far you can push yourself. You know, you're physically push yourself. And then I saw this Goliath of a man, you know, Sir Steve Redgrave, we all know now, you know, slumped over and having won that race and saying, you know, if anybody sees me in a boat, you know, my permission to shoot me and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to go to the Olympic Games and I want to win an Olympic gold medal. And
that early.
Yeah. And so I made the decision then, and that was sort of 15. And if you ask anybody who knew me growing up, if they asked me, you know, what I was doing and when I did the kind of junior trials and all that kind of stuff, I was like, well, this is just part of the process. I need to do this to go to the Olympics. So this is what I'm doing. And I just knew, and I just devoted everything from a very early age to do that.
And you kind of were successful in the junior system, again, successful in the under 23s. And then you picked up your first World Championship medal in 2003 as part of that young eight.
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky. So my rowing career actually was pretty linear. as from a junior, you know, I got into the junior team. I got a medal coached by Mark Banks. You know, Mark Banks played a large role in my rowing career over many years. I then nearly got gold in my final year, you know, at school in the Junior World Championships. Then I went off to Oxford Brookes University and had great, you know, sort of learned how to really train hard under Richard Spratley and all the guys that were down there. And I got a medal in my first year at under 23s, and then I got another medal in the next year, and then we got invited to the World Championships, and I got another medal at the World Championships that summer. And it was like, this is just amazing. And then we won Henley that same year. I was like, well, this is so easy. And then I got into the 8 in 2002, and we had a tough season, actually. We had a really tough season where we came last in most of the races with some of the guys who won the Olympics in 2000. And that was when I started to kind of really understand, okay, this is not so simple. And Steve Gunn kind of really galvanized a young group of athletes that year. And they kind of took the guys who won the gold out of the 8. And we then had this kind of rogue group of young athletes with guys like Ben Birch and Robin Board Taylor and Joe von Moltzen. And, you know, we all had nothing to lose. So it was that group that then got the medal in 2003 and qualified for the Olympics. And that was, I still remember that race, you know, like crossing the finish line in Milan. Nobody in the team thought we had any chance of getting a medal. And there we were beating the world champions, you know, the year before, you know, the Germans, and we qualified for the Olympics. And I just remember the feeling of being like, oh my goodness, we just qualified for the Olympics. Wow. And then the next year it just kind of carried on getting even better. You know, like I got in the pair with Andy Hodge. He was, you know, early in his career. We won trials. And then I got asked to be in the four with Pinsent and Cracknell, and it was just like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. But then, you know, the reality, everybody knows, you know, around about Lucerne time, just before Lucerne, I had a stress fracture of my ribs, and in the race in Lucerne, I ended up collapsing both lungs. Sorry?
Both lungs.
Both lungs, yeah. And I still remember the final. So we won the semi, and I didn't feel right. And it just didn't feel right. And I remember going to the start line, of the final, and we went off, like as hard as we could. And I remember just pushing, but feeling like no power could really come out. I was just kind of like this rabbit just moving up and down the slide, but no ability to kind of produce any power. And we ended up coming third, and then losing to the Canadians and the Americans. But I was in all sorts of trouble, couldn't breathe. And then when I got back to the UK, I got sent for more tests, and they said, look, you've collapsed your lungs. So that was just before we flew out to altitude for the Olympics. So that was my first shot at the Olympics. But the reality is, like, it was very, very tough. But one of the cool things about rowing is we all care so much about each other, and each other's success. So it's even when you have that failure in yourself, all I wanted was success for that four. So Matt and James and Steve. Yeah, all I wanted to do was for them to win. And the same for the guys that were in the 8, that had a terrible Olympics that summer. It just didn't work out. And it's really admirable in our sport that, you so many people who are spares at the Olympic Games. Like, I can think of, Marcus Bateman, Alex Gregory when he was on the sidelines in Beijing, Noddy, who, for London, they could quite easily be in any of those boats. It's a marginal decision, and how supportive all those guys and girls have been. And I think it's just because we all care so much that we want each other to succeed. And that's what's the beautiful thing about rowing, is that, you're fully accountable and committed to each other, because you can't go faster than anybody else in your boat. You all have to do it together, or not at all.
Yeah.
And it's this great community, and it's this helping of each other. And I know I've talked a lot, Martin, but there's a reason. Is this helping of each other and helping your fellow crewmates to succeed and to get more out of each other, and to get through those challenges together, or for them to get through their challenges when they're a challenge for them. And when I went through this process in 2016 of trying to understand who I was and why I loved rowing so much, it wasn't because I loved racing or I loved getting a gold medal. It's because I just loved helping my fellow crewmate. I loved seeing them succeed. I loved the journey. I love the journey that we went on. The best times, if I look back in rowing, were the training camps we went on. Those terrible, terrible, tough days where you're at 2,500 meters up in Silvretta, and it's hailing across the lake, and you're soaking wet, and you've got to do your 4th 2K piece, and you know what I mean. You're just exhausted, but you get through. You do it because you're all there to do it together, and you get through it together. And it's that journey that I miss, and that I think is so great. And actually, the most hollow and shallow bits of our sport for me was actually standing there on the podium.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because you just stood there, and it's like, oh, right, it's over, and yeah, so I just thought that might be an interesting thing to share, because I think a lot of people who are fortunate enough to still be able to do the sport now, I think it's worth just taking a step back and recognizing the training that you're doing and the time that you're having with each other, and just appreciate that, because that's just what's so awesome about the journey, that you're on, because it doesn't last forever. I remember Greg Searle, he once said to me when he came into the team in 2012, and he'd come from working at Lane 4, and he just loved the training, and he loved the whole thing, and his performance was incredible for somebody who was his age. And I remember talking to different people about it. It's like, and Jürgen just loved him being there, so much as well. And there was two things. It was one, because Jürgen loved it because Greg was finally properly doing Jurgen's training program. But also, you know, what Greg said is he's just like, this is just so much better than, you know, anything else you can do in life. In work, in the working world, you know, you just have no idea how great this is. And I remember listening to him going, oh, you're only saying this because now Jurgen loves you and you're doing you're doing his program properly and all that kind of stuff. But actually, he was right. He was genuinely right. You know, that's one of the most precious things we can do in our time. You know. Anyway.
So how does anyone replace that, or is it something that you can replace? Do you have to find something else that sort of motivates you? What's that process like for you?
Yeah, so I did struggle with that for a long time after sport, and I think that was part of the thing that I, you know, was difficult up to 2016, and actually why I started rowing again in 2016 to kind of try and refine some of that commitment, that journey together, all that kind of stuff. But what I do now is, lots of people want to stay healthy. They want to have positive mental health, positive physical health, and the biggest thing that stops them getting out the door and going to see the sunrise on a freezing cold morning like it was this morning is themselves. But if because they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to turn off the alarm and you know, I'm going to roll over. But what's interesting is if I say to somebody, I'm going to go for a run tomorrow morning, do you want to meet at 6 o'clock? And they say, yeah. 99% of the time, I am always going to be there to meet that person to go for that run, or for that cycle, or for that swim in the river that's crazy and it's going to be uncomfortable for the first whatever. And that's because there's an accountability. There's an accountability to each other. There's a commitment to each other. There's a true social connection to each other. And this is all these are all core components of like positive well-being and positive mental health. And so if I commit to that person and then I show up and then guess what? I'm sharing that journey with that individual, whether it's just running through the woods or swimming in the river, or it could even be just playing a game of tennis or whatever. And that's what I try to recreate, you know, in my personal life with sport now is, you know, we have it with the old boys rowing group that we have, the leg ends, you know, the fact that there's a Zoom erg every Thursday night or Tuesday night, you know, that anybody can dial into from around the world. Guess what? I don't want to do an ergo on Thursday night, but if I know that you're going to be there to do it, I'm going to show up, you know, and I'm going to do it and I'm going to feel great. And that's how I try and recreate some of that journey in my personal life. And that's just made me a lot happier. And then guess what? That infectiousness of that enjoyment, because I'm getting other people to be there, I'm creating accountability, those groups grow, more people can share those experiences. And guess what? That's exactly what we did with rowing. You know, the squad grew, the experiences were shared, and then people would keep doing it and they repeat it and then they do it for other people, you know? So, yeah.
There was that question that Ian Weir asked that, you know, just before we went on air, I kind of mentioned to you about sort of motivation. He's, you know, moved from London up to Tyne, and I think he's struggling to find motivation, thinking obsessively about racing, you know, the Jackson Trophy for the Head of the River race and so on. You know, could you offer him any advice? So it sounds like you just have, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the other things that I've done. So what was interesting when I first finished sport after London 2012, like I wanted to stay fit. I wanted to compete, but I just really struggled with the motivation. I really struggled with the motivation because everything was just not as good as, you know, the Olympics. I wasn't as good as I was when I was training for the Olympics, naturally, because we're not as fit and, you know, not training as hard and all that kind of stuff. You know, always looking at my watch, you know, what time am I doing? How fast am I going? How fast am I running? How fast am I cycling? What's my power? Blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And I eventually got so frustrated with it, I just stopped. And then I got really fat and heavy. And then, you know, that's when a lot of the kind of other repercussions of sort of mental health kicked in. But what I did when I revisited getting fit again is I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to do this for the purity of the movement and the purity of the moment. So if I'm running now, you know, sometimes, yes, I will look at my watch, how fast I'm going. But if I'm running now, I will just really consciously try and be in the moment to understand like what's going on in the surroundings around me, like really look at the sunrise, really enjoy the person that I might be running with if I am, or if I'm running, to just really try and feel that complete freedom in my body. And that is just amazing, right? Because there is no result needed, but it brings, you know, a lot of people talk about mindfulness and the practice of mindfulness. Well, if you can do that in your sport, whether it's rowing or cycling, and really try and be in the moment, it's just an incredible feeling. And that gets you through those days where, you know, it's difficult to be motivated. And it's really difficult to be motivated right now because it's very difficult to understand, well, what are my goals? Like, what can I commit to? Like, what event can I do? Because we don't know if there are going to be any events. And I've talked to lots of friends, and, you know, it's a real frustration. Some people who are training for triathlons and stuff, and they've had all those canceled, and you can see it in their performance and their training. You know, it's all over the shop. So why train for an event that's driven by anybody else? Why not create your own? You know, so on the winter solstice on the 21st of December, guess what? That's the shortest day of the year, and I'm going to run all daylight hours of the year. No one's going to tell me to do that. No one's going to, I don't have to pay to do that. But that's a big challenge, right? That's a big deal. For me, I'm 100 kilos for a run for like 8 hours. You know, there's going to be some mushroom clouds all across the Ridgeway. But but that's how I do it. And so those are the other things that you can do, is put in place those own personal events. But also, I've told you now I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm now accountable to you and whoever else is watching now that I've got to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So maybe that might help.
Yeah. Take you back, Alex, to getting into this four with Hodgie and Pete Reed and Stevie Williams in 2005, 2006. Pretty scorching four, won the World Championships both of those years. It must have seemed like coming back after Athens that things had really turned around for you, that, you know, things were going really well in those years.
Yeah, I mean, we had a great run. You know, we had 39 races unbeaten.
Wow,
and 39 for nearly 3 years. The only race that we lost in 3 years was the final of the World Championships in Munich. But I think, you know, and it was awesome. I mean, it was, you know, that first year was just awesome. Some of the rowing that we did in 2005, just, you know, the boat just felt so easy. But I think I got a bit lost. I think I got a bit lost from a psychological perspective. And I heard you talking to Kath Bishop about this the other day. You know, I became so fixated on, you know, the only success is winning. The only success is being in the top boat. This is the boat I'm going to be in. It's the Cox's Four. We're going to win every race between now and the Olympics, and we're going to win the Olympics. And I became lost about exactly what I'm just telling you about, which is the purity of the sport, the enjoyment of each other. Yeah. You know, egos definitely started to get bigger because we won more and more. You know, we got a lot of. Back then, the top boat got a lot of the you know, press. And I, you know, I hold my hand up. You know, I definitely got lost with actually, you know, how can we keep him? And I, like you said at the beginning, I have a lot of intensity, and so I was just brought more and more intensity to this four, and as opposed to just enjoying the moment a bit more. You know, if it's going fast, why do you have to try and keep on doing it to make it go slow? You know, try and just enjoy being in that, you know, in that moment. I mean, but these are all great, you know, easy things to say in retrospect.
Important though.
But important, yeah, important. It's and this is what I think is so cool about now. And I think this is one thing you asked me at the beginning. You know, what can rowing or sport do that wasn't there before? I also work with. I've just been accepted onto the True Athlete program, which is this mentor-mentee program as one of the mentors, and I'm super excited to do that because I think another big part of mental health and well-being is is helping others. By helping others, you help yourself.
Yeah.
That's why I work with WageStream, because we do it's a social purpose business, and we're providing a massive solution for society around their financial health. But the point being is that I think that this True Athlete program, if they could have this, if we could have had athlete mentors who'd been there and been through it, talking to us more, and just to be able to reflect on their experience and not have that threat of that sort of coach athlete relationship of maybe I'll say the wrong thing, or that freedom of being able to ask those questions. I know you and I used to talk every now and again, but having a more of a structured program to go through, I think would be so valuable for the athletes now.
Wow, that's great. I'm really pleased to hear that, Alex.